about some of the latest recruiting news in the 2025 and 2026 class. We had our Peach Jam episode last week. Things are starting to heat up with some of these 2025 and 2026 players. So let's get right into it. Before we do, be sure to subscribe to KSR Plus and subscribe to the KSR YouTube channel. We're going to have a lot of great content coming up over the course of this next month. So special offer, $1 for 2 months. So go and use that code. Let's talk about some 2026 recruiting. I know things were kind of quiet on the 2026 front heading into Peach Jam, but now that the staff got to see some of these guys during the live period over at Adidas and Peach Jam, they've started to extend some offers. I know Tyron Stokes, the number 1 or number 2 player in the class, depending on which service you look at, he was a guy that already had an offer from Kentucky, but besides him, Kentucky hadn't offered anyone in the 2026 class heading into the live period, and Tyron was a guy that was offered by the previous staff, so it was just something that carried over. He's a guy that we talked to over at Peach Jam, and Kentucky's still pushing for him. He's originally from Louisville, so he has that Kentucky connection, but it's still a long ways to go. There was some talk about a reclassification. I don't believe that's going to happen. I think he's going to remain in the 2026 class. So he's a big target in that class and someone to look out for. But let's talk about some of these newer offers, starting with Mika Murnin. We talked about him last week, saw him play at Peach Jam. Mark Pope and Jason Hart were front and center for his Peach Jam Championship U16 performance. He put on a show, and that was enough to earn him an offer. I know that Illinois is another school that's mentioned with him. It's still early, like it is for a lot of these 26s, but Kentucky getting that offer shows that he is a priority for them. 6'10" power forward. He can shoot the ball. He can drive to the basket. He can defend. He can do everything you want in a modern-day stretch 4. So I even talked to his high school coach over at Arizona Compass Prep, where he's transferring this year, and he said he wants to see him play some of the 3, play some of the 4, play some of the 5. So he's a versatile guy that you can move and mix and match. And Kentucky will be a school that's involved for the duration of his recruitment. Now let's get into some other guys that Kentucky has offered. Brandon McCoy Jr., the number 1 or number 2 player in the class. We talked about Tyron Stokes. It's really a 2-player battle for that number 1 spot between Stokes and Brandon McCoy Jr. He got that offer from Kentucky this week. I talked to him on the phone right after the offer. He said that he was in the car with his dad when Coach Pope and Coach Hart called him to offer. I was talking to some sources that are real close to his recruitment, and they say that he plans on taking an unofficial visit sometime in September, maybe October. He wants to get there before the season starts, before there's an actual game, so that he can really see what the day in the life of a Kentucky student is, the day in the life of a Kentucky player. He'll see the glitz and glamour of an official visit, a game day visit during his senior year. But as a junior, he wants to get a lay of the land and see what Kentucky has to offer. That's a big name that Kentucky is now officially offered. They've got another offer out there to Caleb Holt. He's a top 5 player in the class. They're really pushing some of these top 5 players, and I know my colleague over at KSR, Zach Gagan, talked to him. Potentially we could see a visit at some point. It's still super early, but it's good for Kentucky to get involved with Caleb Holt early, because there are a lot of schools involved: Auburn, Alabama, you got Georgia Tech, Ole Miss. Basically, the whole SEC might be involved at some point. So it's good to see Kentucky making a push. The last guy I want to talk about in this 2026 class is Darren Rippey Jr. Kentucky hasn't offered, but they've started to reach out. He's a guy over at Blair Academy in New Jersey. That's the same school as current Kentucky Wildcat Otego Away. He was contacted by Kentucky assistant coach Jason Hart. Now Kentucky, it's still early with him. They haven't extended an offer. There's a lot to go, but Darren told me that he's excited to continue to hear from the staff, keep building that relationship. He's been on campus at a lot of schools. We wrote about him over at KSR Plus. He's been to St. John's. I know Rutgers is a school that he's been to a few times. Syracuse, a school that he's been to. So he's taken some early visits. Being an East Coast kid, he's been able to go to a lot of those East Coast schools. once things ramp up into his junior and senior year, I would expect, if Kentucky continues to push, to see him on campus at some point. Talking about some more recruiting news, really the big name that everyone's talking about in this 2025 recruiting class is Jasper Johnson. What is Jasper going to do? I know UNC and Alabama are really the two schools that you're hearing about the most. I know Louisville was on his list, but the three schools that seem to be in prime contention are Kentucky, UNC, and Alabama. And something interesting that I heard, I know that a lot of people are saying that Kentucky may not be the favorite right now. Maybe Alabama, maybe even UNC. I was told something very interesting from a source very close to 2025 point guard Caden Lewis, who said that they expect Kentucky to land Jasper Johnson. This is straight from someone very close to Caden's recruitment. And Caden, for those who don't know, a 2025 point guard that Kentucky's prioritizing. And if they move towards closing on Jasper Johnson, Caden will probably go to another school. I know UConn is probably the school that's rumored the most with Caden. So that was something very interesting because people seem to think that Kentucky's drifting away from Jasper Johnson. I don't believe that to be the case. I think Kentucky is in a very good spot. I think a lot of this may come down to NIL and if Kentucky wants to meet that NIL number. But sources around college basketball, around recruiting, believe that Kentucky has a very good chance with Jasper. So we'll see where it goes from there. Welcome back. I'm now joined by a very exciting guest, On3 national basketball reporter Joe Tipton, here to talk about some of Kentucky's targets in the 2025 class. Joe, thank you for joining me today.
Happy to be here, man. How you doing?
Doing well. I'm excited to talk some basketball recruiting with you. For those of you that don't know, Joe is behind Tipton Edits. He makes commitment edits for all the top players in the country. And he's now also reporting for On3 Sports, talking to a lot of these recruits. And let's just talk about some of these guys that Kentucky's going after. The first guy I want to ask about, Jasper Johnson, obviously Lexington native, now going to Overtime Elite in Atlanta. So, Joe, you mind talking a little bit about Jasper's recruitment? Where do things stand, and how do you feel about Kentucky's chances?
Yeah, Jasper recently announced his top 5 schools. Of course, Kentucky was included along with North Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas, and Louisville. The only schools that he has not taken official visits to is Louisville and Arkansas. However, I'm told that there is a chance that he does take that official visit to Louisville before he makes the decision. Currently, the target timeline for announcing a commitment is right around August 20th, maybe a little bit further down the line. Of course, that's subject to change. But he's a kid whose recruitment has been interesting. I think when Coach Cal was still at the helm at Kentucky, I think most programs kind of assumed that he would be a shoo-in, being a Lexington kid with all the ties and connections to the university. However, that kind of shifted and changed when Cal obviously left for Arkansas and Pope took over, and his staff have done as best of a job as they can trying to build a relationship quickly with him, but it kind of puts them at a disadvantage when he has no familiarity with them prior to their move, or very limited familiarity with them being at BYU. So right now, the two schools that I would say are the primary candidates to land him would be North Carolina and Alabama, giving the slight edge to Alabama. Alabama was his first high major offer. He knows 2 guys already on the team there that play with him in AAU ball for Team Thad. And but one thing that I will say is I'm not going to write off Kentucky out of this recruitment. I still think that there is a chance. I just think that North Carolina and Alabama have done a really good job of prioritizing him and have been in the mix just as coaching staffs longer. He just knows them better. He feels a little bit more comfortable with him. Obviously, Pope, this will be his first year at Kentucky. He doesn't, it's hard to, exactly understand what what it'll look like for him. But yeah, that's what I would say. Still, there's opportunities for Kentucky to get back in the mix, and we will continue to monitor that as this nears the final stretch of his recruitment.
And a lot of people obviously around Lexington know about Jasper, but a player that maybe some Kentucky fans might not know about is Chris Sinak. He's a guy that Kentucky just watched on the Puma circuit during the live period. What do you think about his recruitment, and how do you like Kentucky's chances there?
Yeah, Chris Sinak is a very interesting one because people didn't really know who he was until this spring and summer. Jamie Shaw does a good job of evaluating guys early. He put him in On Three's rankings pretty high, I think around the top 20 to top 30 several months ago, before a lot of these blue bloods programs like Kentucky, like UConn, like Duke kind of caught on. But he's a kid originally from New Orleans. LSU and Houston have both been involved with him early. He's a guy who's now making the move to Link Academy, a powerhouse program in Branson, Missouri. Kentucky is definitely involved with Sinak. I'm sure they'll likely get him on an official visit sometime this fall. But he's also got schools like Arkansas, Baylor as well. They're definitely in the mix. But still kind of too early to pick a favorite, just because he hasn't even taken an official visit yet. This level of recruiting is still new to him.
Someone that may be taking an official visit to Kentucky soon is Tunde Yesu. I know we talked to him over at Peach Jam, and he said he was moving back Kentucky to be the last official visit as per request of the Kentucky staff. So where do you see things standing with his recruitment, and who do you see as the main contenders for him?
Yeah, early on, Tunde, he was being, well, even now, he is very much so being prioritized by Arizona. Tommy Lloyd and his staff have made him their number one priority in this class. So they're definitely in the thick of it as well. USC is another school that I would watch. Eric Musselman, they've hosted him on campus for a visit as well. I honestly do like Kentucky's chances in this recruitment. He speaks very highly of them. Speaks very highly of Coach Pope. Kentucky was his dream school. Of course, that was with a different coaching staff, but kind of the brand there still exists. So I think that he is a player that very well. I'm not saying that he will suit up in the Kentucky uniform, but there's definitely an increased chance. And I do like Kentucky's odds, especially they will be, if it does end up being Kentucky being that last official visit, they'll be the last school kind of on his mind.
I want to ask lastly about an in-state guy, Malachi Moreno. I know that he just released a list of schools, and he set an official visit to Kentucky for Big Blue Madness. So how do you feel about where things stand there?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think he's got a list of 8 schools, a few schools on there. Well, I will say this, Kansas offered him recently, and I'm sure he will consider them. I haven't confirmed that with Malachi personally, but I would say ultimately this recruitment will boil down to Kentucky and Indiana. But right now I would give the edge to the Kentucky Wildcats, the local program. They've done a great job making it known that he is their guy. He is their big in that class. And we'll see kind of things, how everything rounds out, see if he goes on a few more of these visits. I know he's looking at schools like North Carolina and Ohio State. But I do like Kentucky's chances with Malachi.
Well, Joe, I asked you about 4 guys. I know there are a lot of guys on Kentucky's radar right now, but the question on everyone's mind is who will be this first commit in Kentucky's 2025 recruiting class. So I want to pose that to you. If you had to predict today, who will be that first commit for Kentucky in 2025?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think any of Kentucky's targets have set a commitment date, or at least not publicly, at least. But if I had to just take a strong guess, it would be Malachi Moreno, the guy we just talked about, the 7-footer out of Georgetown, Kentucky. I think he might be the first one to come off the board.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. We're excited to follow your work and see some of these commitment edits in the coming months. I hope to see you back here soon.
Absolutely, man. Enjoyed it.
Now let's head into the final thought. Today's show, I know things are kind of slowing down, but I feel like it's the calm before the storm with a lot of commitments, official visits coming. The big news, though, it's Jasper Johnson. Where is he going to commit? I know Joe said that Alabama and UNC He still perceives them to be the favorites. I'm not so sure about that. I think Kentucky could be the spot for Jasper Johnson, but only time will tell. I think that we're going to get a commitment pretty soon. So Kentucky, are they going to land the in-state kid? We'll find out. Until next time, I'm Jacob Polacheck. This has been Here Comes the Boom. Be sure to subscribe to KSR Plus and subscribe to the KSR YouTube channel, and we'll see you again soon.